Hey writers, it's Megan in All Writers Welcome. And the first thing I want to say is if it sounds like I'm under attack, it's because my neighbors are moving and there's something happening on the other side of my office. But I assure you I am safe. But there may be some loud pounding. All right, so I wanted to use the evening writing time today to talk about outlines and outlining. So I would love to hear from people who have a way of outlining that they adore. I would love to hear from people who never outline. I would love to hear from people who detest outlining and think it is not for them. Let's talk about it. Let's bring this all into the surface, to the surface rather. So I want to start with a definition of outlining. To me, outlining is any planning you do that lets you write. An outline is anything you can write from, in my opinion. Like that sounds kind of like something you want, right? Something you can write from so that you know what you're writing. And I think a lot of people hear outline and picture the Roman numeral outline that you've had to do in school and it feels really constraining. And that's not the only kind of outline there is. And, what they teach us in school is actually all geared toward linear and visual learners. And there are so many different kinds of learners. There are, at least 12 kinds of intelligences. They're discovering more all of the time. So my first message is don't be afraid of outlining if you have been convinced there's only one kind. There are a lot of different ways to outline, and my hope for you is that you find the one that makes you feel excited to write and that you find useful. I mentioned Roman numeral outline, and that is very linear. And that might be something that you really love, going from point A all the way through to point Z and hitting all the stops in between and saying, this is exactly what my story will look like. But another way to outline would be to storyboard, to not even use words, but to create images that capture the different moments in your story. But even that feels intimidating to a lot of writers because it's about so many details. It's so many individual scenes that you have to track. Some people love Post-its and note cards, and this is a really great strategy for anybody who feels like, well, I always change my mind. I can't outline because I'm going to change my mind. I would really recommend do your planning on something you can pick up and move. In fact, if you are somebody who learns by doing, if you're a kinesthetic learner, if somebody wants to show you something and you're like, don't make me stand here and watch, I need to be like, give me the wrench, I'm going to be the one to get in there and do that. You might really, really thrive from doing movable outlines. So when you get ideas, you jot them down on a Post-it, you jot them down on a note card, and then if you have note cards, you can tack them up to a bulletin board, you can tape them up on a wall. If they're Post-its, you can stick them up on a wall or any flat space, a mirror. I have the mirror that's behind me that I have covered with a sheet so you don't get a glaring reflection, is actually my whiteboard. I take wet erase markers, and that's where I do planning and all kinds of fun stuff because I like having a big, wide open space. So if I were somebody who wanted to do Post-its, I could stick my Post-its up there. But if you are a whiteboard person, you could do your planning all over a big whiteboard. Some people in the group have posted they love making spreadsheets, but those are all really different ways of planning. Right? A spreadsheet is something like a totally different animal from taking notes all over a whiteboard or putting up Post-its. So that's like, if you walk away with one thing from this live, I hope that's it. Outlining does not have to look one way. And because it's just what allows you to write, it's really linked to what is friendly to your brain. So my goal for all writers is that they have a way to outline that feels friendly to them, that then is something they can look back at and work from. Okay, why do I want you to outline? Stephen King doesn't do any plotting. Yeah. Do you know what? I'm going to admit something now, and you guys might all not like me afterwards. I don't care for Stephen King's books. The one book of his that I enjoyed was his memoir on writing. I thought that was really fascinating, and I learned a lot from it. But I don't care for his stories. And I feel like when I read his stories, I can kind of tell that they're not plotted. because to me, they don't go anywhere. So I'm happy to take any flack you guys have for me. Woo, I don't know if I've admitted that in public before. I don't care for Stephen King's novels. Um, but to me, that's really risky. And if you are not a name brand like he is, I'm not sure why you would risk it. Especially because I hear so frequently from writers that they don't know where to go next. And that's where an outline would be helpful. That it's meant to be a tool. So here is something else that may make you feel a little friendlier toward outlines. And that is, you don't have to do all of your outlining at once. If you're feeling like, oh, it just is robbing me of my creativity, and I've heard that comment from people in the group, that it shuts down my creativity. I totally understand that. It's an analytical process. It is certainly not as fun as getting in there and drafting, but it is not, it's not like you have to eat all your vegetables first and then you get your dessert. I think outlining happens in stages. So far, any questions? Does anybody want to ask anything or comment on anything about outlines? Did that spark any ideas, or do you want to tell me how terrible I am because I don't read Stephen King? Okay, at any point, please feel free to put your questions into the comments so that we can. I would love to hear from you and help direct you in your journey to figuring out how you outline. Oh, Carrie, you like his movies but not his books. Well, yeah, okay, phew. There are at least two of us who are not huge Stephen King fans. My husband loves him, like could just read that all day, every day. And I go, okay, to each his own. But okay, so I want to come back to this idea of you don't have to do all of your outlining at once. Your outlining is probably not the first planning piece you've done, although it may be. We're drawn to our stories from different directions, and for some people it might be there's a particular plot that I want to go through, and in that case your outline might be the first thing. I get drawn to stories because of theme and character. So by the time I'm doing my outline of what will happen in the plot, I've already thought through what kind of story I want to tell regarding the theme, the outcome, the character who will be involved. So this is not the first thing I'm doing. But a great friendly way to start your outline, whether you're working on plot first or you're working on some other aspect of your story first, is just to tell the story. And the best way to do this, in my opinion, is to talk into a recording device and tell your story the way you would summarize a movie to somebody. This means you're not going into a lot of detail. So you're telling us the major developments and points. You're giving us a little bit of background about who these characters are. There's this boy, and when he's 11, he discovers he's actually a wizard, and so he is sent off to this boarding school for wizards, and once he's there, he's like a celebrity because his parents had died and they were very famous wizards, and now he's trying to navigate school, and he makes two best friends, right? You're giving kind of a mix of background and what's happening, and then you're walking people through the major developments. So once you've told this out loud and you've recorded it, you have the broad strokes of your outline. And from that point you have some options. You might listen back to this and just be able to start writing. And if you do that, that was the easiest outline ever, right? Rock on, that would be great. You may want to, just keep kind of replaying it, and you'll listen up to a certain point and then right from that. If you don't feel like that's enough to get you started, then the next stage would be to take that recording and transcribe it. There's all kinds of cool hacks you can do for this. You certainly don't have to sit there and type it up. You can open like a word typing or a voice typing software. If you have Dragon, that's fantastic, or you can use the one in Google Docs and just play your recording to your software and it will type it up. And doing that has a real advantage because then you can take your long form outline and break it up into different pieces. You might start doing chapter divides, or you might start with, this will be even just in thirds will help you break it up to kind of see what the balance is, how you're moving toward your resolution and how you're developing your conflict. So starting just by breaking up the story you told into different pieces, maybe now you'll feel like you can jump in and write. Okay, great. But you might still want a little bit more detail. In that case, think of your story structure. Even though your story is a unique, beautiful, wonderful snowflake, you still are going to be following story structure. So you're thinking about your inciting incident, which is what starts the conflict. You're thinking about your conflict, the moment of highest tension. You're thinking about the resolution, right? And you get that basic triangle. And by the way, I was just saying snowflake as in like a special, wonderful, unique thing, but the snowflake method of outlining stories is also relevant to this conversation, right? Because this is the methodology used, right? You start with just that simple triangle. Then you can consider, what has to go in between my inciting incident and my climax, and that gives you your rising action. And what are some scenes that have to happen in between the climactic moment and the end. And you can start filling in more pieces. If you're familiar with the snowflake methodology, it ends up looking fractal-like, where you're getting really, 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 really detailed, and that might seem off-putting to people. But remember, the level of detail is up to you, because your outline just has to be something you can write from. All right, so once you've filled in, some of those anchor points, now ask, can I write from that, right? That's what you're always asking. Can I write from what I have? And if so, go for it. Start writing. You don't have to sit and outline. There isn't a certain amount of time that you need to spend on your outline. It might be jotting a few things down, and then you're good to go. Carrie says, my outline is a mess of different parts, Post-its, mind maps, and pictures. Oh, I love it. And Carrie, you and I had a conversation about using a method I really like, which is a table to fill in more details. Like once you have the anchor point, then you can expand between two moments that happen. And you go, okay, I know my characters start at this point, but then they have to end up over here. What could happen in between? And you start building the pieces. And Carrie, you had this really cool method where instead of making a table and writing in it or typing in it, you put things on Post-its and filled them in. And then you could say, oh no, wait, first they should do this. And you can move things around. And I love that you're using the way you think. You're using your thinking style to empower you to write more instead of feeling constrained by the outline. If the outline is a headache, it's not the right kind of outline for you. It will still be hard work. There's just the hard work of getting through all of the parts of your story. But if your outline is something you hate, my guess would be it's not the right kind of outline for you. It's not working for you. And if that's the case, you should get in the group and tell us what kind of outline you're using and what's not working about it for you, and we'll help you brainstorm different ideas for outlines and doing something that can work. All right, so once you have something you can write from, as I mentioned, you're going to have to be filling in the gaps. And again, this is an ongoing process. You're not doing all of your outlining first and then you're drafting. You're doing as much outlining as you need to so you can start writing, and then you're returning to it when you need. So I mentioned that table method, but Carrie was talking about using mind maps or pictures. This is a great place to tap into your creativity. And when you're looking at, okay, my characters are at point A and they need to get to point B, what could happen in between? Go ahead and do an all-out brainstorm. Go ahead and list all the different possible wacky ways they could move through events so that they get to where you want them to be, and make it like a really inviting and enjoyable experience when you outline. This would be a place where getting up is really good for some people, going and taking a walk. You're still, outlining, you're combining brainstorming with the process, but that's how the writing process is. It's recursive, it's iterative. You don't do all your brainstorming and then all your outlining and then all your drafting. You keep coming back to earlier parts. So these are, like, I hope, some insights that will get you started thinking about how you outline. Oh, and Carolyn Rubino asks, what if you just wing it? Okay, a lot of people do. A lot of people totally wing it. It may work for you. So does it work for you? Do you like winging it? Or are you looking for something different? Because I think it's very few people who actually like winging it all the way. I got an email from one of our subscribers recently telling me that she has not one, but several books that are all at the 40,000 word count place, and she doesn't know where they're going. And first I thought, oh wow, I'm really envious. That would be fantastic to be able to just write that much on 9 different books she's got going. But that feeling of not knowing how to end it is what stops a lot of writers from finishing. So yes, sometimes you do like winging it. Then when you do it, but when you don't, these are tools you can use. So there's no like moral reason to outline. I don't encourage people to outline because I think this is the proper way to write a book. But it's my strong belief that for most people, for most writers, it's necessary. So what I love to do is just help people find a way of outlining that works for them. Cool. So, as you keep going, Coralyn, you may find you want to do a little bit more planning, or you may find you like winging it. And here's the distinction to make. Just because you're outlining, it doesn't mean you're outlining first. It's a really dry way to get into your story. It's not the sexiest. It's not the most exciting thing to start by outlining. But if you jump in maybe with writing a scene, you've got you just see that character in a certain place, and you get started, and you're like, oh yeah, and she's here, and she's doing this, and she's fighting the pirates, and oh yeah, it's really cool. That is a great way to begin, and then you can look back at that and say, okay, now where do I want this to go, and how do I plan? The hardest thing for me, oh boy, it really depends. There are times when it's time management. Right now, in the project I'm working on that will be published hopefully next spring, and is due to my editor in October, I'm finding the parts of it that are really easy are the parts where I had, in my outline, been very detailed. And now this week, I have not been doing a lot of writing, because this week I got to a part of my outline where I just put in these like really vague, broad points. And every time I think about going to write, I think about how I'm not sure what I'll be writing next. So you can tell also that's my bias, right? I really, really do well with outlines. So I love to have one that I know I can write from. But I find that to be true for most writers I work with, that one thing that stops them from even doing their writing is they know they're blocked before they even start trying to write, because they know going to it, before they even go in, oh man, this is the place where I have no idea where I'm going next. So my responsibility, my job, is to go back to my outline and to flesh out more what's coming up in this next section I can work on, so that I can take away that stress of working on it. Carrie says, I was winging it till I had clients who wanted an outline to approve prior to starting the project. Oh, wow. That's a great motivation for creating an outline, to have to show it to somebody. But again, the purpose is not to make you outline because that's what proper writers do. The purpose is to prevent you from getting a long way in and then not knowing where you're going. That is such a common way for writers to give up on their writing. And you may totally change your mind. You may write from your outline and then go, oh, this is not at all the direction I want it to go in, and then you'll change your outline, and that's fine. But it's like a scaffolding. It's a support system for your writing. You know what? I wouldn't know the number. Corellin asked, how long should a novel be for young adults? I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I do have a resource for you. And I'll post the link into to the comments, because I found a great blog that goes through different genres, including young adult, I'm fairly certain, and what a common word length would be. So I will get that for you. Okay, any more questions about outlining? Anybody have any favorite ways to outline? Have I convinced anybody to outline? I hope. Again, an outline is just something you can write from. So if you find the mode that works for you, whether it's scribbling all over a whiteboard, or it's Post-its, or it's a spreadsheet, or it's a storyboard, or it's just a recording of your whole story that you told to yourself, it keeps you on track, and it keeps you going in the direction you know you want to go in. All right. So if there are more questions or comments or responses, please feel free, just leave them in the comments of this video, and let's keep the conversation going so that you all can keep writing. All right, thanks for joining me. I will see you next Thursday for more writing tips with Megan. Ta-ta for now.